Greetings, or as we say, Wafube. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum. So, this video will be an answer to a question that was posted on another video about Ninzuwu and Moorish Science. So, I decided to discuss Moorish Science and the Necronomicon tradition, or Moorish Science, the Necronomicon tradition, and Ninzuwu. Ninzuwu and Necronomicon are kind of interchangeable, so we'll inject a lot of the Moorish science. What does it have to do with all of this? People open up a book like the Necronomicon and they see the Mad Arab, or they may open up the ivory tablets of the Crow, which is a featured in Ninzuwu book, and they may see something about Zeus, coming from the Middle East and traveling to the Far East and stuff. And so, evidently there's some Moorish activity in these paradigms or whatever. How does this relate, to the Moorish science today and those who practice it? So I want to start this off by explaining a couple of things. Wafube is a greeting in Ninzuwu. And, to kind of get to the basics of Moorish science and Necronomicon and that sort of thing. Basically, it can all be determined by understanding why nationality is important. Some people may agree with this, some people may not. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Basically, nationality is important from a shamanic perspective. I'm a shaman, you know what I'm saying? Misael Bay, that's a shamanic name. I can go to bat with it. It's a Moorish name also, but, primarily, I practice shamanism. People know me for that. It is what it is. So how does this relate to Moorish science? Whatever. Okay, so let's take it back to nationality then. Why is nationality important? You may hear a lot of people say nationality is important, and they'll tell you some reason. You can tell they're just parakeeting and don't know what they're saying. Actually, a lot of people may not even be aware of this because the levels and depths of what nationality means. But here is a great way to really get to the heart and understanding it. In ancient times, every city was ruled by a tutelary deity. This tutelary deity was an ancestor shaman who was later deified. Okay, because he was operating in the God realm or the astral realm to try to help his people who are descendants. So that's where nationality begins from. It begins understanding where you come from and your connection to the God link ancestor so that you're spoken for in other worlds other than our physical world. Okay, so that's how that happens. I've researched this thoroughly. Anybody wants to go to bat, we just send me a question and I could answer it on those issues because I'm well researched in this subject. Every ancient city, especially in the area of Mesopotamia and the land of Canaan, of which I'm familiar, Noble Joe Ali said these people descended from the Canaanites or whatever, in those cities, every city was ruled by a tutelary deity who was an ancestor shaman. Okay, so to bring people back to some stuff I said in some other videos, the ancestor shaman, he was revered because when he died, it's like a birthday in the spiritual world. That's why you have a wake today. A wake, they don't do it as ritualistically, but the wake is for people to gather together to talk about the individual, to give him that energy, to help him to excel in the other worlds. But if you're not aware of that, then it just looks like something that's just a custom. But actually, it's to help birth that person in the post-life world. We know from research, archaeological research, that the oldest remains and findings illustrated that shamans were the first kings on earth. Other than the jinn who they were a progeny of. Okay, so the shamans, they ruled, and so when they died, the people came to them and they gave them a big celebration so that these people can operate for their behalf in the in the physical world. They can operate in the spiritual world and help them out, and the people in turn can help them out by offering them sacrifice, gifts, and praise. That's why nationality is important. That's it. It shows that you're spoken for in a world other than this. Now, the people who are not spoken for uh, don't exist. They were considered black people because they didn't have that connection. So this is where, in Moorish Science, they talk about the black and white thing. That has a lot to do with it. And the people who were spoken for um, and represented by a deity were considered the sons of Ishtar originally, or of the light of Ishtar. Okay, and Ishtar, represents, her color was white. You see what I'm saying? And how we know that, you know, a lot of the Moorish people are the same people who resided in Canaan and who are descendants of the Sumerians. In a way, you could just look at the 5% flag, the flag of the nation of gods and earths. The flag of the nation of gods and earths is an 8-pointed star with a 7 over it. Now, if anybody knows anything, 7 and 8 equals 15, which is Ishtar's number. Her number was 5 because she represented the pentagram, and her number was 15. Okay, Ishtar was represented by an 8-pointed star, and she walked through 7 gates. Ishtar is a Venusian deity. A Venusian deity. So she was known as the morning and evening star, because we're going to get into this, because this is going to get deep. So whatever you need to get your snacks and stuff, I'm going to go in. Okay, so she's a Venusian deity who was later typified by the Yoruba Oshun. Oshun came from Ishtar. Okay, it wasn't the other way around. Oshun came from Ishtar. Okay, how we know this? We know this because of the Yoruban legend that Oshun's dress is the color yellow. It used to be white because, she was prostituting, so she had to wash her dress out so many times and it became yellow. Ishtar is connected with sacred prostitution, okay? The word sacred prostitute is where the word priestess comes from. It's very simple. But what I'm saying is that in DNA memory, the flag of the nation of gods and earth was constructed by Shamgar. Okay, so this is, it's like in DNA memory. Like I don't think the dude sat there and like, Ishtar, whatever. But this is how this sort of thing came to manifest, in this hemisphere. But it basically represents Ishtar. And why is Ishtar important to the Moors? I'm going to explain why. You look in the first chapter of Genesis, right? You ever notice, like, when you read in the Bible, you look at the first chapter of Genesis, after every creative day, even before the sun and moon was created, there's an evening and there's a morning. And it's funny because evening precedes morning when you would think would be the other way around. Here's the thing. In ancient Mesopotamian lore, there was, mythology about Ishtar descending to 7 gates into the underworld. Now, this is going to tell you where you living at, here and now. So, if you look at Genesis chapter 1, it talks about the evening and the morning. Okay, so the evening and morning star is Ishtar. So the mind of the race of Ishtar was descending down through the 7 gates. And as it was descending, it was preparing a home for itself. And finally, after everything was finished, then it took possession of the body, male and female. It says in the first chapter. In the second chapter is a totally different account because there's a dude that's created from the ground. It didn't say nothing about that in the first chapter. In the first chapter, it gave way to multiple people being created. If you don't believe me, you can get whatever version of the Bible you want to and look in the first chapter and see all the things that were created as the mind of Ishtar was descending down. And before it assumed human bodies. Okay. Now, you look at the what do you call it here? The second chapter of Genesis, and it tells you there was no vegetation covering the earth, none of that. And this God decided to make a man from the ground. That's someone else different. You see what I'm saying? That's different than the first chapter. The first chapter talks about after every end of every creative day, there's an evening and there's a morning, because the mind of Ishtar was descending down. In the creative aspect, it's the evening. In the warlike aspect, is the morning, because once the creation was finished, you had to cut it. You see, but why is that important? When you look at metaphysical and the etheric realms, if you're going to create a home, just like you create a home in the physical world, you have it built first. You're not going to move to the land and say, okay, let's build the home and move all your furniture. You're going to build the home first. So, like, you look now with technology, right? Who's to say that that's some other stuff coming in and man is building it for something to inhabit? That's another topic we'll discuss in another video. I've been wanting to get to that topic, so we'll get to that when we can. But a little bit more, I don't want to lose my train of thought and this sort of thing. So, this is where Ishtar, her relationship with the Moors comes to, is explained a lot in the Necronomicon series and in the Ninzuwu series. It's explained how those things, are achieved. But when you look at nationality for what it is, it's basically like a connection to one's ancestor deity where they're spoken for in another life. Now, in the biblical lands, okay, which is the same kind of lands that were, held by Mesopotamia and stuff like that, a lot of those things are contributed to, what do you call it, the Abrahamic religions. Okay, so people who follow Abrahamic religions, I guess their God, they're spoken for in the post life, which, me personally, I think Necronomicon-Ninzuwu don't really necessarily agree with that. You see what I'm saying? So if you're studying something and it's dealing with like the Abrahamic lands, I'm going to tell you why in a second. Let me go back for a minute. In the Yoruba myth that we discussed, with Oshun similarities and Ishtar, it said that that Oshun's children would be taken away because she kept prostituting, as we can see, fell out into the diaspora. So definitely, the Ishtar tribe, or whatever people want to call it, is over here. You know what I'm saying? That's how that thing works out. Now, getting back to the thing with the Abrahamic religions, here's something interesting. If you look in the Dictionary of Islam, written in late 1800s, I think it was 1900 or 1890 or something. I'll try to put the description when we finish this video in the captions, the video itself. If you look in the Dictionary of Islam, it talks about the jinn heavily. The Dictionary of Islam, the one I'm referring to, is written about 1900, I think 1890, by a man named, a doctor, PhD, named Thomas Patrick Hughes. Okay, this dude, he had nothing to lose. He was just writing as things was retold to him, when he traveled through the Middle East, and, he put all the legends together. But it's an interesting section that he has on the jinn. Jinn is probably the most informative material on the jinn, outside the material I've written. But it was written a century before. Another woman, I think her name is Rosemary. I interviewed this lady too, Rosemary Gilliam. I think she has a book on the jinn or whatever. But if you look in the connections of the jinn are very connected to what people call the so-called Negro. Okay, long before the colonist era and all that kind of stuff. If you even read the writings of Zoroaster, right? People heard of him, Zoroaster, the Zoroastrian religion, all that kind of stuff. In their sacred books, it says the only way you can tell a jinn from a Negro, so-called Negro, was basically how the hair stood on their head. You see what I'm saying? Now, why is this important to our discussion about Moorish science and all this kind of stuff or whatever? Is because in the Dictionary of Islam, written by Thomas Patrick Hughes, he says that before Adam's time, there were 40 to 72 jinn kings, and their title was Solomon. Okay, this is very important. You know why? Because in Masonry, people automatically assume that the Solomon that they're talking about is the biblical Solomon. It's not. It's the jinn kings. These were the titles of the jinn kings. Anybody who was initiated into real Islamic Sufism knows this. I'm not talking about some regurgitated stuff that they sell to Westerners to feel like they're on board. When you get into like Saudi Arabia and Yemen, in the real bush of these places, this is what's taught. You know what I'm saying? That the jinn kings, their title was Solomon. So when you go into Masonry and you talk about Solomon's Temple and Hiram Abiff was probably the dude connected to the jinn king, which now fits in like the so-called Negro. Okay. Now he's attacked by three ruffians. The ruffians are the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's point blank. It's point blank. What were those people doing in the Middle East? It's a historical record that they were killed and destroyed because, they didn't want to get with the monotheistic religion. Okay. So now this is where the divide is, like with some of this sort of stuff or whatever. But in history, to bring it back around, there was a lot of Moors who were magicians or whatever and was doing their thing. And so Necronomicon studies and Ninzuwu, those are probably good avenues to explore on those ends. But I would say this, in the terms of nationality, Moorish nationality and that sort of thing, I kind of see it as like the African American ethnic identity refers to sons of Christians. Sons of Christians, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You have a Christian name, that sort of thing. So that's their nationality. African American, I don't know how that nationality equates. Jesse Jackson had a lot in pushing it. The dude that invented Town, if you don't agree with him, I don't know why would you follow him to identify yourself as such. But in researching it, it seems to be pretty much what it is. The African American state, okay, so I'm not going to get to that right now. There's something that came to mind. Sorry, people listening. This is called Raw Talk because it's just raw or whatever. Then you have the Islamic nationality of Moorish Science, okay? And a lot of Moors are dealing with magic and that sort of thing, but they used, Islam and Islamism as a quasi-moral code. And that's very important because a lot of times these people talk about, all these ancient civilizations and stuff like that. And there's a reason why they fell. Those ancient civilizations fell because, like every machine, it begins to break down and it got, like, decadent. You know what I'm saying? You can read, was it the Greek philosopher Herodotus? He talks about how the Egyptians had broad noses, nappy hair, and, dark skin and all that. And you like, yeah, man, that's us or whatever. Then like a couple of passages later, he's saying like when the Undertakers got a fresh young virgin body in who was deceased, they couldn't wait to get their hands on it. So this shows how the Egyptians were living. You talk about Horus and Set. Read the stories about sodomy that Horus was doing to Set and vice versa. Do you really want to be a part of that? You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times, if you notice, African Mambata, Dr. York, all these people messing with these ancient stuff, they don't tap into it right. So because they don't tap into it right, they tapping into the sexual decadence, and then wind up happening, they become child molesters or raping young boys and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So, you dudes talking all that Commission, Islam, vice versa, debate stuff, just look at it for what the hard facts are. You see what I'm saying? I'm not going to imitate some nonsense And I don't care how ancient it is. And it's about, perverse, sexual habits. The perversity of sexuality didn't cease until the monotheistic movement, the uprising of the monotheistic religions and stuff like that. So I had did a book, you could look it up online, called the Whoredom Sutra. You know what I'm saying? It's called the Holy Quran of Thelema because um, it gets into a little bit of the history of what was going on, like with the Mayan civilization. These dudes, when a boy turned like 16 years old, he couldn't find a wife yet. The parents would take him to the peasant's place or whatever to get a boy to play with until he can find a wife. This was going on in the Mayan situation. Now, you looking at all this stuff, you know, all these, African dudes writing whatever in their books, Afrocentric dudes, and leaving out the big part of it. Give an example. I'm gonna say this. I'll say a couple of names in the video, or whatever. I saw this video with Dr. Alim. I guess he was visiting New York for a while, and he said, him and his wife, they want to go to the museum or whatever. Look down the basement because they're hiding stuff in the museum or whatever. Now he's thinking they're hiding stuff because of the black people. No, you can look at any. All you gotta do is a little research, and you'll find that the reason why they're hiding a lot of stuff in these museums is because it's too erotic to put to the forefront. So the anthropologists know this, and the people in European communities, they talk about it amongst themselves. So today they list like blacks and gays together. You're like, man, why they do that? That's an identity and a sexual orientation. But then when you read the history, then you see what was going on. But because these people are so like spell struck, I'm not talking about Brother Alim or whatever, but just in general, with these jewel facts that they find without looking at the whole picture, they think something else was entirely going on, like people living like born again Christians, and that shit was like, it was like, it would make Rome look like Boy Scouts. You understand? Okay, so I can understand the Islamic balancing factor if a person's going to be mystical or whatever, or shamanic, because you may kind of need that balancing factor. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story, going back to Solomon, if we looked at Solomon as the Jinn King and Hiram Abif as the one, the Moor who was subjected to the three ruffians or whatever, the three ruffians, like I said before, is Judaism, Islam, and was it Christianity or whatever. Those religions, the religious forces of those. Maybe not the science behind it, because there are profound sciences behind it, but the religious side of it, definitely, because these forces went in and destroyed it. The whole Bible is about two things: reading someone's biography, hero worship, the Judaic law, and destroying the ancient people of Canaan. That's that. The Quran is a little bit more, it doesn't have like that type of agenda to it. But the Bible, same stuff or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So um, that's just some of the things that people who work with the shamanic arts of Necronomicon and uh, Ninzuwu, we try to bring prosperity to those arts. So how I look at it is like, you know, African American, that's more like a Christian nationality, people who believe in Christ. Whether you claim to be Christian or not, it's still the same thing. If you're riding, under the terms of carrying European surname or identifying yourself as such, then you fall in that category. I'll give you an example. Dr. Umar Johnson. Here's a guy who talks about swirling, which is, I guess, dating someone who looks different than what you are, which is kind of really reinforcing the slave masters, uh, rules to the slaves or whatever. How people adopt that as whatever it is beyond me. But I know one thing. If he was to go out with someone of European descent, it wouldn't be an interracial marriage. It wouldn't be anything interracial because he's carrying a European surname. So all the woman is doing is she's just dating someone who's carrying her forefathers' legacy. It's just that simple. Malcolm got into this like back in the '60s and stuff, and these dudes are still playing around with it. I just changed first name. I don't want to, come to the family picnic acting a little bit different or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. If you none of these things, in order for a person to engage in interracial dating, he has to come in his own name. And by the time he comes in his own name, then he kind of knows who he is and can make the decision he needs to make. But if someone, I don't care how pro black they are, whatever, you know, decides to date someone who's European or whatever, and they're carrying a European surname, that's not interracial dating because she's the woman's only marrying somebody who's coming in the name of her ancestors. That's just common sense. I don't see like half this stuff on YouTube is garbage. It's garbage. But, people doing what they feel is best and they have a right to do what they have to do. But that's that sector. So if you're in that sector, you see what I'm saying? Now here's the other thing. Here's another thing that's not known about shamanism. The first surnames were carried by priests. So let's say, like, I represent Inki, which, is connected to Baal, which now is pronounced Bay. A lot of people don't know that. I wrote an article about it in the origin of the surnames Bay and Eel. Okay, so, you know, that's whatever it is. But if you come in a surname that's European, you know what I'm saying, then that means that you're going to be part of the caste system in the European tree of life when you ascend. That's what that means, you know what I'm saying? So who knows? I mean, a lot of people, I do ancestry, genealogy work. Someone wants to tap me for that, that's fine. I do a lot of that stuff. And a lot of those people, in Americas, they're related, white and black. People talk about all the presidents are related. Most of the black people are related to presidents too. You know what I'm saying? If you understand genealogy, you go back like 20 generations, you're looking at like 600 or 700 people who are your ancestors. All those people come from the same place? That's stupid. Then if you got 200 years in the country, think about it. You know what I'm saying? A lot of, even the kings, like the Merovingi line, like a lot of times people come to me, of quote unquote Moorish descent or whatever, and I do their ancestry. And a lot of times I give them back, I can get anyone back like 200 years, anybody. I can get them past 200 years is what I mean. And finding their ancestry. But, like when it comes to people of Moorish descent, sometimes I go a little further back. And then usually I wind up, and these people are related to like the Merovingi line and stuff like that. Why? Because a lot of those slave owners and stuff who intermarried with or had, children, with, melanated women or whatever, these were like heirs to dukes who were heirs to kings in Europe. You see what I'm saying? So, if someone wants to hold the European name, then that's fine because they're representing that side of it. But if you're going around angry and stuff and you're walking around with a European surname, I don't care if the whole planet becomes black. Guess whose legacy you're carrying? And that's just what it is. So that's the African American thing. The Islamic thing will probably fit more into the Moorish paradigm. Right? It was false synonymous with that. So that's that nationality. You see what I'm saying? So you have the Christian nationality, you have the Moorish nationality, and then you have Ninzuwu, which is shamanic nationality, and for the most part, it's people who claim heritage of the jinn. When you go back into research and the history of all these ancient kings, you come in their lineage to mythological figures. Some people say, oh, the mythological figures was Moorish. Maybe it was. Who knows? However, I know one thing. A lot of times, they're looked upon as legendary and imaginary by some people. And a lot of that is because they were jinn. Jinn was the progenitors of indigenous people. If you look, it's called a term. I'm going to give you a term, a jewel to look up. It's called pre-Adamite. And anytime you look into pre-Adamite, you're looking at people who were born when the North Star was coming from the Draconis constellation of Thuban. So that's when the pyramids was made. All that kind of stuff came when the North Star was different. And the North Star is telling you what's going on the planet. You see what I'm saying? Morse know that because they deal with the North Star navigation. Harriet Tubman used to pray to the North Star and receive visions. You don't have to go through any deep research to find it out. You can look it up on Wikipedia. Look under Harriet Tubman. See how she prayed to the North Star and received visions. The North Star is the ruler of the solar system. Okay, so when the North Star was Thuban, it was the constellation of the dragon. So when you read the prophecy in Genesis chapter 3, when it talks about the seed of the serpent and the seed of, Adam or whatever, that's who it's talking about. You'll be bruising the head. I think indigenous people are bruising the head because they don't know what's going on. That prophecy is pretty much on point. But if you're looking at it and that's not only me, I have research where I've seen what do you call it, like archaeologists and scholars and all that kind of thing point out the same thing, that prophecy is concerning darker skinned Turians versus the lighter skinned counterparts. So that's not like something that we're just throwing out in the wind and stuff. And I have all these references. I've written about them in my books. If you want to know a little bit more information, you could check a book called The Moabite Stone, which I wrote. Actually, it's a re-edition of another book I wrote called The Genealogy of God. The Genealogy of God was so strong that the copyright authors rejected it for religious reasons. Nothing to do with research, infringing upon anyone's copyright. It was the first time I got a book. So whoever has that, man, they got $1 million. You know what I'm saying? But it was a book that I read that was kind of rejected by the copyright authors because it was too much. You see what I'm saying? It was too much. So I put it out like in another way and say, like, the Moors, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of brothers who really seeking the way, who really trying to find a sincere way. I mean, I do respect the science, Moorish Science and level of degree because they teach the love, not hate. And they also teach, about the 5 principles, freedom, justice, equality, and stuff like that. So those things are very important to inculcate into one's, activities, as a person trying to build themselves up spiritually. It's about that. It's unfortunate that people have tried to turn it into something else. It's just foolish. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times people come from different groups and they like the idea of being something. I don't want to promote that. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm just going to say what it is. They come from different groups or whatever, and they don't, check who they are at the door. And then they're carrying on this behavior and this emotional baggage, and they start doing stupid stuff. And you looking at this dude like, damn, you 50 years old, and you trying to squat somebody's house out? Like, what are you doing? Are you that stupid? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's something called, this is where things get tripped up at. What is Moorish law? That's where it begins. Moorish law is not picking up a dictionary and studying documents that were created by European lawyers and stuff like that. That's not Moorish law. Law in itself, when you look at the word occult, it's studying the hidden natural laws of nature. That's what occultism is. So if you study those laws, you would never be off course. But if you go and picking up a dictionary looking for a loophole and stuff like that, which is what it's become, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh man, as soon as you come in, you put, you get an ID card, a Fez, and you get with some gunshot group or whatever, call themselves Moors, and the first thing you want to do is pick up something, get a dictionary, and then look how to get out of something. That's called stupidity. Just be responsible. That's all. Just be responsible. It's not like saying people aren't responsible, you know what I'm saying, who come in certain, certain titles and attributes, but there's a lot of, dirty baggage and stuff like that, and that indicates to me as a shaman that on some levels, wandering spirits are entering certain things will have entered. And the only way to keep wandering spirits out is to keep a clean agenda. And it's just that simple. You know what I'm saying? Keep a clean agenda. A lot of these people, you know, this is the problem. You tell someone something that there's something and they haven't went through any discipline, it just gets stupid. You see what I'm saying? Because all they do is study conclusions and call it knowledge that of self. They're just studying conclusions. They haven't got to the knowledge. I think it goes from knowledge to born, right? But that's exactly what that means. Instead of studying the conclusion, you know what I'm saying? Obtain the knowledge of self. You see what I'm saying? Through, learning about who you are by learning the laws of nature. You know what I'm saying? And that's only taught in only one religion. You know what I'm saying? Which is a religion. Some people call it the craft. Some people call it Wicca, whatever. And I don't want to really throw a lot of them words out there because some of that stuff is pagan and doesn't deal with the technology of occultism. But what I'm talking about is the technology of occultism. That's what we teach. And then Zulu and the Necronomicon tradition. There's no, foolish stuff. There's no hero worship. You ain't got to put on a costume and then act like you worshiping Jesus and never read the chapter where Jesus talks about people wearing costumes in the synagogue. Like, you just come as you are. You see what I'm saying? Because you're here to better yourself and better your mind. You're not trying to, to make something new out of something dead. You know what I'm saying? So that's how that goes. But, there's a lot of stuff I can say, like on, Moorish Science and some of the benefits of it. But a lot of times, like the people involved, they just got to get away from the foolishness and stuff like that. That's all. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of foolishness going on, and people just got to learn to get away from it because you can put on a costume, but it doesn't change who you are. You know what I'm saying? In order to do that, you got to work on your mind, and you have to work on your heart and your emotional self. You have to work on your body. You have to work on yourself. And this is what is lacking in the conscious community. You know what I'm saying? Why Moors want to be part of the conscious community is beyond me, because the conscious community is lost, and half the time it's something put together by the FBI. You have people actually on YouTube telling the youth not to believe in religion and to follow science. But then when you follow science, you discover that modern science came out of Operation Paperclip with the Nazis. You see what I'm saying? When the United States took over how many tons? It was 21,000 tons of scientific papers out of Germany. In the first year, made over 300,000 patents from what they pulled out of Germany. And then 4 decades later, you got some dude posing because some street hustler posing as he's like leader in the black, like he's a leader in the black conscious community, telling young people to believe in science. Why even debate with some nonsense like that? You see what I'm saying? So Ninzuwu was a little bit more hidden. Necronomicon just was more hidden. We're not trying to convince people to join us and all that kind of stuff like that, or whatever the case may be. People can join as they need be or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But, it's all about looking at everything overall. So in this presentation, there was a couple of, information covered because I just want to knock out the video or whatever and just, get into some things about, some of the things that, comes into Moorish science, some parts of Ninzuwu that stands on its own or whatever. That's where it's at. Sorry, I apologize if I went round robin on a couple of subjects. It was just some things on my mind and some hypocrisies that I see. It's like, man, this is wild. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? This is some wild stuff here. But Moorish science is all good. You know what I'm saying? As long as it's good. But when you start getting people looking to do stuff that's not legal and all that kind of stuff like that, it gets a little wild. All I can say is, like, you can have a right, and that right could be spoon-fed to you just so you put you in jail. It could be a trap. You see what I'm saying? And, you have the only right that you have is the right to survive. You have a right. That's what you're here for. The highest law is the law of survival. You see what I'm saying? And if you're coming into anything with an attitude that, like, well, they did it to us, I'm gonna do it to them stuff, and you can't really do it to them or whatever, then you're just gonna get yourself caught up in some stupid stuff. You see what I'm saying? It's just that simple. That's not turning hate into love. You know what I'm saying? And so the idea, like, there's a lot of things. So as we're talking, let's just break it down. Some of the things to look out for in any organization when you're studying Ninzuwu and the Necronomicon tradition, and perhaps if you're interested in the Moorish Science, these are some things that you might want to check over. First of all, do not join an organization that has no structure. Don't do it. They should tell you at the door what the structure is. And the reason why is because when you look at what was going on in South America, a lot of the powers that be in other organizations, they were able to infiltrate these groups by posing as artists, or entering the artist community with no structure, or joining groups that don't really have a structure. So people so eager, look at your complexion, say they don't believe in race, and then look at your complexion. Okay, you good, you can come in, and not even know who dude is. And the next thing you know, this dude is on the most wanted list or whatever. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you have something with a structure, something that's legally registered, it kind of keeps you away from that because, it just kind of keeps you out of the nonsense of that. And you need to have your freedom so that you can operate and cultivate on yourself spiritually. So when it comes to organizations, you want to make sure that things are established in an upright manner. They don't have to be, a nonprofit or whatever. It could be for profit, but as long as it's established in some legal, way or something like that, that's good. It's not necessary. You know what I'm saying? Some organizations don't necessarily have, legalities or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that's just how they operate. Um, the next thing that you want to look out for is you want to be part of something that's serious about cultivation. A lot of people use this term knowledge of self, and usually, unfortunately, like in certain communities, it just amounts to hero worship. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just simply what it is. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't really amount to you. Like a long time ago, I was like, you know what? I could remember this, or I can learn astrology, or learn how to astral project. Like I could use the memory for something that universally connects me with my ancestors. Those are sciences that, if you're part of an organization that's claiming an ancient lineage, you should be able to trace on a map the sciences that they're teaching at that time today. Now, this is the catch 22 about that. You don't want to get into acclimating yourself spiritually through the art of imitation. Some groups, everything's about imitation. You pull out a dictionary and say, hey, M.R.A.S was doing this in 1501, and they'd be like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? And that's just like, you just like, madam. You know what I'm saying? Like, you imitating that much. You know what I'm saying? So you don't have no agenda. You know what I'm saying? If it comes to that, there's no agenda. Second thing you want to avoid is you want to avoid groups with racial hatred. You know what I'm saying? Anger and hatred are the two weakest emotions in the martial arts. If you operate on that, then you fall victim to anything. And this is how this works. This is how this science works. You don't have to be a magician to understand this. Your emotional state creates your reality. It gives you the drive to do what you want to do. Your thoughts, it can generate emotions in a way, but or they may not. But your emotional state is pretty much what you draw to you, and it's also how you pick the thoughts that you meditate on. Okay, so when people get you angry, whatever truth they're evolving, and they send these people back home to their neighborhoods who now think that they're right. I'm right. You know what I'm saying? And they send them back home to their neighborhoods. All they're doing is sending back a person home to draw negative things to themselves because they're in a negative disposition. You see what I'm saying? And if you think that goodness is talking about other people, and we got this idea that we're holding on to that's right. Right is the reason why a lot of people go to war. Right, doesn't mean anything as far as the moral compass because you can kill 1,000 people feeling right. You see what I'm saying? Like in the greater karmic good, right is whatever it is. That's why one example I could draw from is the Good Samaritan. And I draw upon it simply because it's wise. You have some people, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they passed the dude on the road. They wasn't breaking any law. They were still righteous because they have the ability to follow a law. That's what righteous means, the ability to follow a law. But a good person took the dude off the road and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So just because you write about something, that means nothing to the invisible worlds. You see what I'm saying? Anything, you could probably get more trouble feeling right about one thing and not seeing the whole picture of something than you can about, just taking the time to look at everything. You see what I'm saying? But because, these people, are so angry and stuff like that, they don't realize that poverty is an emotional state. It's a depression. You see what I'm saying? Years ago, let's give some advice. Wealth wasn't always considered how much money was in the bank. It was considered something that anyone could obtain. Anyone could be wealthy regardless of how much money they had because if they was a virtuous person, they would draw the same experiences to themselves that a person with money had. Does this mean that a person shouldn't operate from money? Of course, they should seek to improve their condition. They should seek prosperity. You see what I'm saying? And money that comes along with that, man, they could be a great individual. You see what I'm saying? They could do a lot of different things. They can express their ideas. But in the course of their work, they will still encounter meeting people of different walks of life, traveling. They will just have a richer life by just being prosperous, virtuous. You see what I'm saying? So now if you're into some organization and they allow all sorts of street stuff to go on, then you just need to get out of that because the streets in ancient mythology is known as the netherworld, the underworld. So you see these dudes, I don't care what they got on, they got on a crucifix, and I'm about the streets. First, the streets don't care about you personally. Streets never cared about anyone. Okay, so being committed to a street is like literally being married to a street worker. You know what I'm saying? Literally. Besides all of that, you can't be in the streets and be down with a deity that's in heaven. You see what I'm saying? You could be in the streets and be down with the underworld deity, and if that's what it is, that's what it is. But don't think, you down. So all that street behavior and stuff, you gotta check that at the door. You see what I'm saying? If you wanna, really pursue cultivating yourself spiritually through some more Moorish paradigm or, through the art of Ninzuwu or whatever, you gotta check that out the door. You know what I'm saying? So and it's just knowing the timing of everything. You know what I'm saying? Just knowing the time. I'm gonna sum it up with that. I'll get with this in another video because there's a lot of stuff to discuss when you talk about Moorish topics or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But basically, what I can say is that, like, now at times is just a different time. So a lot of stuff that you see, like, on the circuit of consciousness, it ain't gonna ride really too much longer because the world is moving from civilization to globalization before it goes to celestialization. And if you don't know those factors, then you just got to be in tune with it. A lot of things that you see as we go into the next age, it will just be shrinking. Ethnicity, race, all those things will be absorbed. They'll be absorbed through amalgamation because humanity has to become one in the globalization process before it goes to the celestial process. And those are the four processes of any race of man: hunting, gathering, civilization, globalization, and celestialization. Those are the 4 steps to create how man becomes his ultimate self, which is divine. So, in order for him to do that, he has to go through those 4 phases. Okay. So, I would say that, um, a person, they should definitely check out whatever it is that they're studying. The original question was, what does Ninzuwu have to do with Moorish science or whatever? That's what I answer in the video. So, answered, there are some similarities. Science is science. It doesn't really, we start studying a science that has an adjective in front of it. I guess it deals with a specific field of science, right? So I guess there are some overlapping things because there's a respect for nationality in Ninzuwu, um, all that sort of stuff or whatever. But there's a lot of differences too. Some, you know, not too many, but there's some differences. You know what I'm saying? And if I was going to compare them, as stand-up sciences to each other, of course, it's going to be different because there's different names, um, just different stuff involved, different books of study. So those are like just different things. The paths do run parallel to a point, and some places they verge and come back around again. If someone wants to study it, who's an MSTA, that's fine. That's good. We'll be happy to, um, work with you and help you get along your way and stuff like that. But we're going to be organizing more for that for the summer. You know what I'm saying? And this is not the last video I have on this. So if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to hit me back up. Or I flew back.